Hello and welcome, I'm Oles Garjuk and you're watching Head to Head with UATV. The 55th Munich Security Conference in Germany closed on Sunday after 3 days of meetings. The main issue covering this year was tensions between Russia and the West in connection with Moscow's aggressive policy against foreign countries. A new defense proposal was presented to Ukraine aimed at unifying Europe amid a changing security environment. To talk more about this, we are joined in the studio today by Vitaliy Martynyuk. He's the head of international programs at the Center for Global Studies Strategy 21. Hello and thank you for joining us.
Hello.
So this security conference was a big event involving 35 heads of states and governments and also 80 foreign and defense ministers. So this is a big thing that happens annually. And as far as I know, there was some proposal to Ukraine. There was some initiative that could become a part of European collective defense strategy. So something is shifting in that strategy. Could you explain us, please?
As the key result of the Munich Security Conference, I can underline that Europe, I mean European Union, would like to be responsible for its own defense and security.
What do you mean, who is responsible for the security
I mean
nowadays?
this initiative to establish European anti-missile defense in Europe. It is just an idea, but everything is started with an idea, and after that we can see some policy and even practical steps.
So what you mean is that the United States shouldn't control the defense and security system of the European Union. That's what you mean?
European Union was created as economic union, and now we see that from year to year the EU would like to be more safe and more secure and more responsible for this security, for its own security. And high politicians in Brussels, in Paris, in Berlin, they would like to decide on themselves everything in the field of security and be less dependent on NATO and on Washington.
Okay, so they want to be less dependent on NATO and on the United States influence. Okay, so could you please outline some key messages of this new proposal for the European, this new missile program or missile initiative? It involves Ukraine, as far as I understand. It involves Ukraine, Poland, and Latvia, if I'm not mistaken.
Now the United States is developing NATO or US defense system in Eastern Europe, and it is obvious that it is under control of Washington. That's why Brussels would like to develop its own missile defense system to be located the same region in Eastern Europe, and with the aim to protect the European Union from missiles from the East. This means that European Union goes further than just non-military security. Non-military security means that European Union has focused on cyber security, on migration problems, on anti-terrorism activities, on some combating criminals and so on. But idea to establish this anti-missile defense is like a signal that the EU is going to go further than just non-military activities in the security sphere.
Strengthening the relations between the countries.
Yeah. And it was not initiated just in Munich. It was initiated before, a year ago, when the initiative, so-called PESCO, was launched. PESCO is a very important initiative for the European Union because it comprises different programs and projects, collecting some, not all, but some EU members for different aspects of security, like I mentioned, cyber defense or cyber security, as well as military transportation capacities, military medicine, and so on. So now we can see that the EU is moving further to develop its own military capacities.
This is interesting, and probably this is why there is this issue reason between Donald Trump and Angela Merkel, because Donald Trump wants 2% GDP annually being paid to NATO for membership, and Angela Merkel, she just expressed herself that this is too much, and she had some other proposition according to this. But speaking of Ukraine, how would this influence the defense capacity and this defense capacity from Russia in Ukraine if we do implement this proposal from the European Union, from Brussels, about this new missile program?
As far as I know, even several years ago, Ukrainian authorities proposed to use Ukrainian territory and facilities for anti-missile defense systems. And this proposal was addressed to NATO, and now we can see that Ukraine is included as potential country for the EU anti-missile defense system. So this means that Ukraine is on the way of security and military integration into the European Union. I mean that Ukraine is regarded as a key EU partner in the Eastern Europe, and it is obvious because Ukraine
to counter threat from Russia.
Yeah. Because Ukraine faces the hardest aggressive actions from the East now. So it's a very good signal for Ukraine because it means that Ukraine isn't alone in security dimension, and Ukraine is regarded not just as a recipient country, but a contributing country for the European security and defense.
Yeah, and also it means that the EU is also interested in Ukraine strengthening its military defense and security capacity, so this is very positive. At the Munich Security Conference, our President Petro Poroshenko also met with the US Vice President Mike Pence and on the sidelines with German Chancellor Angela Merkel. And we do have some interesting sound bites from this meeting. Let's watch.
I'm grateful for the opportunity on behalf of President Trump to meet with you again, to express a very simple message to you, to the people of Ukraine. We're with you, and we stand with you. The recent circumstance that took place in the Kerch Strait is a reminder of the challenges that Ukraine faces from Russian aggression. And I want to continue to assure you that the United States will continue to stand with Ukraine and against Russia's efforts to redraw international lines by force.
2014 dann im März
In 2014, when the annexation of Crimea occurred, this was a true violation of international law. Petro Poroshenko is here and reminds of the aggression in eastern Ukraine, so we have something that looks like fragile stability, largely thanks to the Minsk agreements and the negotiations that France is also taking part in. We are looking for paths to regulate the situation in the Donbas. But we are without a doubt far from that. I've already said to Mr. Poroshenko many times that I will support him in any case and in any situation.
In your opinion, whose stance was stronger and probably more positive to Ukraine?
We can see that Berlin plays a very important role for Ukraine, for Ukrainian security, for Ukrainian measures to counter Russian aggression. But at the same time, we can also see that Germany is continuing to build Nord Stream 2 gas pipeline.
Yes.
And it is negative signal for Ukraine, because we know that this pipeline is not just about gas supplies. It is about general issues of security in Europe, and for the European Union including. So Berlin has very interesting views on further security and cooperation in Europe. From one hand, Germany supports Ukraine. Germany is a key European negotiator in conflict between Russia and Ukraine. But from the other hand, Germany would like to continue cooperation with the Russian Federation in energy sphere. And it's very important to hear what Mr. Pence said. He said that Washington would like, not in details, but the main idea that Washington supports European allies in the West, but it could not support them if they are dependent on the East. And in these sentences, we can see that Washington is very critical with regard to Nord Stream 2 project, because the United States sees this project as increased influence of Russia on the European Union.
But what was the main phrase from Pence's speech for you? I mean, the most influential for you, because as far as I've heard, he just mentioned Russia trying to redraw international lines and that the United States is supporting Kiev. But the experts do criticize a lot Pence for being soft-worded in this speech. They do say that it looks like he read it off paper, some kind of this speech fulfilling maybe Trump's request, but not really willing to do so. What is your stance on that? So was this position strong enough expressing support to Ukraine, or was Merkel stronger in her speech supporting Poroshenko directly?
If we analyze just speeches at the Munich conference, yes, Merkel was stronger, very strong supporter for Ukraine. But if we look at the picture in the whole, at all activities and relations in the world, United States remain more bigger supporter for Ukraine.
So words sometimes do not mean actions.
And I think that Mr. Pence was not very critical because of some troubles in the United States, and because Washington did not want to receive a very strong reaction from the European side. So to keep calm relations between Washington and Brussels, between Washington and Berlin, not to receive another portion of critics from Berlin, from Brussels, as it was a year and a half ago, when the law on new sanctions against the Russian Federation, against Nord Stream 2, was adopted, and that time the President of the European Commission, Mr. Juncker, said that Washington could not criticize the European Union because it was just internal deal of the European Union.
So you meant that the European Union would criticize the United States in case if the United States was criticizing? Yes, but what if the United States expressed a little bit stronger condemnation towards actions, aggressive actions of Russia? That would be more positive, maybe signal, well, at least for Ukraine, and that could actually be somehow in line with Merkel's speech that she also delivered, and we could see the reaction from the president, from Mr. Poroshenko, that he was quite happy to hear these words. Well, unfortunately, we are running out of time, but there are many topics to discuss about this conference, and we know that there were our political prisoners held in Russia were discussed, and potential Russian interference in upcoming Ukrainian presidential elections, but we know that there was nothing concrete about it. So could you please sum up some key results for Ukraine from this year Munich Security Conference? And we will conclude on this.
The first positive result is that Ukraine was in the center of agenda of different discussions at the Munich Security Conference. But at the same time, we don't receive some new views how to resolve conflict, how to stop aggression of the Russian Federation. And this phrase, aggression of the Russian Federation, and it is positive, was not discussed at the conference. So nobody hesitated to say that it is real aggression from the Russian side. Ukraine remains in the focus of European security, of the international security, and any European state, the United States, NATO and the EU in the whole, they support Ukraine in territorial integrity issues, in sovereignty issues, and in protecting Ukrainian territory and sovereignty. At the same time, the European Union, as I can see, does not see the situation with a common approach. For example, Minister of Foreign Affairs of Poland, he said that the key challenges and threats are from the east, from, as he said, from our neighbors. And he meant the Russian Federation. Yes, Chancellor Merkel said a lot about Russian aggression and expressed full support to Ukraine.
But still building Nord Stream 2, as you mentioned.
But Germany, German companies, Germany is supporting this Nord Stream 2 pipeline. And at the same time, there were no votes about how to stop the war, how to bring peace in Eastern Europe. Mm-hmm. And
so basically, all these statements, all the speeches delivered about the Ukrainian question, yes, delivered to the audience, they were only about feeling sorry for Ukraine and, I don't know, expressing the condolences to what's happening and to the great losses that we're facing, but actually not discussing the possible ways how to resolve, yes?
Yeah, of course. A lot of speakers mentioned Minsk agreements, but they did not say that these agreements were in deadlock.
Mm-hmm. And they were not effective. They are actually relying on these Minsk agreements as the key argument that the situation in Ukraine is under control, which is actually very strange. But unfortunately, we have to finish. I thank you for this interesting discussion. Thank you for being a guest today in our studio.
Thank you.
That was Vitaliy Martynyuk. He's the head of international programs at the Center for Global Studies, Strategy 21. Thank you for watching Head to Head. I'm Oles Gerjuk. Goodbye.